Good afternoon, my isolated intellectuals. Today, we are going to be extending our look at the second industrial revolution in America, post-Civil War and Reconstruction. And we're going to focus on two characters that came to wage what becomes known as the current war. And we're going to get into that in a minute. Of course, I'm talking about this war that wages in the 1800s, the late 1800s, that's pitted against Thomas Edison, aka the Wizard of Menlo Park.
Hey, Edison, how about sharing some of those light bulbs, huh?
Hey, figure it out for yourself, man.
And against the man who invented the 20th century, Mr. Nikola Tesla. Possibly the most brilliant man who ever lived.
If he's so smart, how come he's dead?
Okay, so where to begin? Well, let's start with Thomas Edison. Now, Thomas Alva Edison, or Al as he was known, was born in 1847 in Ohio. Soon, his father picked up and relocated the entire family to Michigan. There, he was such a poor student that his mother decided to withdraw him from school and taught him from home. Now, while he was learning from his mother, his two favorite subjects included reading and science, where he often would perform many experiments in the basement. Once done with school, he became a telegraph writer, where he would work for railroad industries and he would decipher telegraphs for railroads. Or later on after that, once the Civil War broke out, he became a telegraph writer for the Union Army, deciphering telegraphs and delivering it to the Union Army. Once that was done, he developed an infatuation with examining anything that was technological, and he would take it apart just to see how it was built.
What'd you do?
Eventually, he decided that this was not just a hobby, it was going to be his full-time dedication. So he became an inventor, and he had many failures before eventually moving to New York and having his very first success, in which he managed to improve the stock ticker tape and how it worked. He also improved the one machine he worked on the most, the telegraph, to where it could send 4 messages a day. After much success in New York as an inventor, he wanted a much quieter place where he could go work. He chose Menlo Park, located in New Jersey, where he built his most infamous lab. Not the biggest lab he ever produced, but probably the most famous. There, he is going to hire these people that he deems muckers. They are the people who would be researchers, and they would research and make things for him in his lab. And they came from all over the world, looking for a better life in America. So it's more of that rags to riches story. And they came and they worked for him, and they were called muckers. Now, while in Menlo Park, he became known as the Wizard of Menlo Park because he had many successes while there, including the phonograph, the light bulb, the moving picture show. He dabbled with x-rays and all sorts of other things.
I'm Thomas Edison. I rule!
Okay, Nikola Tesla. He was born in 1856 in what was then part of the Austrian Empire, but would be a town that is located in present-day Croatia. His father was an Orthodox priest, and his mother was largely uneducated. Now, he had a vast amount of schooling that he went to. And he ultimately attended a couple universities. The most notorious was the University of Prague. And he began working for what was known as the Continental Edison Company. And it was located in Paris. And he did a bunch of work. And eventually he had caught the eye. It is an Edison company. So he'd caught the eye of Thomas Edison. And he decided that he was going to move to America. And he set sail in 1884. And once there, he went to work for Thomas Edison. He worked as a mucker and was highly praised by Thomas Edison for his work, and he was often tasked with big projects. Now, having said that, he ultimately only spent about roughly 6 months working for Edison, and no one is really sure why he quits, but he does, and he does so abruptly. So, from that moment on, he decides he is going to go work on a project that he actually was working on before he left working for Thomas Edison, which was an arc lamp for street lighting. But then that moves him forward to what he is going to revisit, which is his idea of alternating currents. All right, so that brings us to the current war. So now we need to fast forward a couple years when George Westinghouse, which is the most famous electrical industry during that time, named after George Westinghouse, who was an entrepreneur, he was vying for a way to light up streets and cities and counties and all this sorts of thing. So the people that were vying for that patent from George Westinghouse are going to be Thomas Edison and his former employee, Nikola Tesla. And they have two different theories. In the Edison camp, he has this idea that is called direct currents. And without getting into anything that I don't really know or understand, I'm just going to put it this way. It's a direct current is basically currents that flow in one direction only. That's it in a nutshell. And Tesla was the engineer of what became known as alternating currents. And those are currents that can flow in alternating directions. Now, the long story short to all of this is that Tesla's was much more affordable for the consumer. Edison had come up with a lot of ways in which direct currents, which is something we actually use a lot of today, direct currents, but he couldn't figure it out a way for it to be affordable to the consumer at the time. Whereas Tesla had a secret weapon called the transformer, in which he could make this an affordable means for the consumer during that time. So his was purchased by George Westinghouse. And how did Edison react? Like any normal person. He took to bashing the theory of alternating currents and saying that it was dangerous, so much so that he would use these alternating currents to go and electrocute any animal that he could get a hold of, including, most famously, Topsy the elephant. So which of these two inventors is the greatest? Well, that's something that historians have debated for a long time. And not just historians, engineers, inventors, and anybody that has any interest in science. In fact, if you want to see a great movie that just was released last year, it's called The Current War. And it stars Benedict Cumberbatch and some other person that I can't really remember at this moment. But it's a pretty good film. You should go and check it out. Who do you think is the greatest? Go ahead and like and subscribe and let me know in the comments below. Happy Monday.